before the season even starts get freaking ruined, basically.
All my shirts get ruined. I just get outdated for some reason. Ooh, Justin
That's like
Fields has
every.
reportedly been talking trash to the Bears defense in practice.
That's good.
Ooh, throwing that on as a talking point.
Oh, we'll talk about that when we get there, Dylan. Let me know whenever we're live.
We're preliminarily live. Let's see if we're live.
It's not live.
Oh my god, DMCA, no.
Why is this in the way? Get that out of there. Why is this? Forget about you, Baby Yoda. Get that out of there. Why is this?
Test. Okay, let me change our test.
Why are you so testy?
Okay, let me change. I am always testy. Okay, we're live. I'm gonna change the stream title.
Oh, this is pretty good, actually.
Bucks lose plus Bucks lose Bears State. Really lazy with titles right now. Usually don't matter that much.
You know.
It starts with the old titles, which is really annoying. Don't like to see it.
Oh.
Okay, we did those. Yeah, we're live in both places. What's up? We're here. Hello.
What's up?
What's up? Hello.
All right.
Got both of them on the side.
We're good to go?
Yes, we are. Why don't you introduce the day?
All right. So, welcome one and all to yet another podcast. A bunch of new topics this week. Not anything super crazy, I would say. There's a lot of fun topics, though. Of course, we're going to go through all the NBA playoffs. Everything from, man, the Suns look like they're going to win it all, to, please, for the love of God, trade Ben Simmons for all of us. And then we'll switch over to some more talk about the NCAA getting exposed by the Supreme Court, which was great. Major League Baseball and the Ben Zobrist situation, which I get to tell you all about, which I purposely told you not to read anything on, so that way I could get your live reaction of how screwed up the story is.
Right.
We're also going to talk about the NFL and the Carl Nassib news, which is awesome. And great for sports, and I look forward to discussing that with you as well. And of course, it wouldn't be a podcast for the Dylan and Dylan podcast if it wasn't going to talk about the Bears at some point. So we will discuss that as well. Kind of a sneak peek if you look at Dylan's shirt today. But we'll be talking about all that and more. So first, I think we'll start with the most relevant topic, which literally just ended about 2 minutes before we were going live here. We were actually watching that before we went live to see the conclusion of that game, which is the Bucks-Hawks game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't really know how I feel about the series so far, although I will say, which I told you in I can't see what does that say?
What about Danks said Atlanta is a one-man show and a pathetic team, but so is Milwaukee.
So this is my take that I'll tell you and give you a little bit of support for you. I told Dylan before we went live as we were watching the game, I said, yeah, if the Hawks win this game, they're going to lose the series. And Dylan said, well, what happens if they lose the game? Are they going to win the series? And I said, no, they're going to lose the series still. It doesn't matter about game 1. If you watch that entire game, like, I didn't watch the entire thing, but if you watch just at the end, Trae Young having to score, 43 points in order to carry Atlanta Hawks to a game 1 win has been done over and over again in the NBA. One of my favorite memories is Nate Robinson lighting it up for the Bulls against the Heat, and everybody losing their minds going, oh my God, are the Bulls going to have a chance against the Heat? And then we dropped the next 4 because, that's how those series go, and that's how this series is going to go. I can almost guarantee that the Hawks are going to lose a series in 5 or 6. 6 only if they get lucky one more time. But typically what happens is a team like the Bucks coming off of a crazy series against the Nets, which we'll talk about in a moment, will end up, kind of taking game 1 at a reasonable pace to kind of see what the Hawks are going to bring out, see the offensive sets, all that fun stuff. And then you get a team like the Hawks, who are a really young team, and I don't think are ready just yet. But you have Trae Young, who's a superstar. I think he's basically solidified himself at this point as being a superstar. And he, is of course going to carry his team through at least one win. But if you watched him play towards the end of that game, he was missing shots short, which I was just telling Dylan too, is if you've played basketball, you understand when a guy's missing shots short like that, his legs aren't under him. And that's what it was for Trae. He had a couple crazy, circus shots at the end to help out, which are also not going to fall every time. And that's why they fell today. And that's why they got the wins. Because sometimes you're just hitting every shot. Sometimes it's just going through no matter what you throw out there. And this is what you saw with Trae Young today. I will say though is that doesn't last. And so the fact that he was missing shots short and looked pretty tired and exhausted, and it took him 43 points and him having a ridiculous game to carry them to a very close win tells me everything I need to know about the Hawks, which is that they're a really, really talented team, but they're just too young and inexperienced and just not there yet. And it's not a bad thing because, I think they're here earlier than expected is what I'll say. I don't think anybody really thought that the Hawks were going to make it this far. So the fact that they're here is already means that their season was successful. But I just know from past experience watching the NBA that the way that this goes is that the better team, which is the overall, better team, which is the Bucks, is going to end up winning the series, and that's just how it goes. So yeah, the Hawks got game one, and that's great. And it doesn't, of course, it doesn't look great for Milwaukee to drop the first, but I suspect that what's going to happen next game is that they're going to come back down to earth. Trae Young is not going to hit every single shot like he was, the circus shots at the end of the games, and you're going to get a Bucks team that's just going to be, all right, let's get back into our offense. We're reeling from the Nets series in the first game and all the hype and emotions and everything that came from that. Now let's settle back into our offense and settle into this new series. And I think they're going to win. If not the next 4 straight, they're going to win the series in 6. And so I would be surprised if the Hawks were able to sneak one more out, maybe at home. So, we'll see how that goes. The series goes. Now, I will say that the Bucks coming off of the Nets series was huge because I said a while ago before the Nets series started that whatever team won that series was going to make it out of the East. And I still stand by that, even with the Hawks winning this game 1, is that series was going to be a hard fought series between probably the 2 best teams in the East. And when a series like that thing happens, whatever team is able to actually make it out of that usually comes out stronger and has grown and has kind of finally gotten over the hump kind of thing, which is exactly what the Bucks and the conversation around the Bucks has been, is that, which I said this, and that's why one of our videos is literally titled that Giannis is a flawed superstar, because he is a flawed superstar. But the other issue too is that the Bucks were also just not a team that, every year was spectacular, but was never going to, go far in the playoffs or was never going to make it, which is how I feel about the 76ers, which we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, that's how I've always felt about the Bucks. And so that series proved that the Bucks do belong here and that they probably are going to go on to the finals. I don't know if they're going to win the finals. I think that the Suns are just too good right now. And I think Chris Paul, I think the Suns actually coming out of this little 2-game break where Chris Paul was gone, winning to both of them, basically allows Chris Paul a time of rest. And now he's going to come to a 2-0 series, and they're probably going to sweep the Clippers. And then they're going to have a really easy time in the finals because they're going to have to go against a really tired, Milwaukee team that just made it through 3 really tough series. So, or 2 really tough series. So it's one of those where I don't think this is going to win them the finals, but I do think that this is going to at least get them there. And that's better than any of the previous seasons, and progress is progress. So the fact that they're, getting there is huge. And now it's one of those where maybe next season they're finally able to put it all together. And, maybe, maybe Giannis works on a shot a little bit more in the offseason, and we can get to where the Bucks are basically the favorite next year. Of course, we'll not jump ahead that far. We'll wait and see. But I do think that this series is basically going to be over in 5 or 6, like I said, and I think the Bucks are going to come out on top.
Yeah. So yeah, I was gonna say you brought up Giannis's shot as well. I think we talked about it a little bit beforehand, but like how can you take that long for a free throw and I don't know what he's shooting this series, but again, from what I saw, it wasn't great. But I don't know. Just your opinion on that. How do you have superstars like that who cannot nail down the free throw? Is it just a demonstration of mentality and it being a mental game more than an actual, mechanical thing? Or what do you
Uh,
think?
a lot of it is mental. It's probably 60 to 70% mental, and the other 30 to 40% is going to be mechanics. And the reason why is because it's the same thing when golfers come up to hit a golf ball, or batters come up to hit a ball, or pitchers going through a wind up and everything. It's a routine that you do every single time, that is the repetition, and the routine helps you to kind of keep the rhythm and then go into the foul shot, being confident that you can hit it. So there's also the confidence factor. Giannis, not particularly a great shooter. And so, that also plays a factor into it, that, sometimes he's not confident in his shot. And that's why, you'll see a guy leave him wide open and he won't take it and he'll dish it out or something like that. And that doesn't happen super often, but it happens often enough where that's affecting him at the foul line too, when he has to just make a straight shot. With everybody all eyes on you and everything. And that's the other thing too, is when the game stops and you're not in a rhythm anymore, that's when the best free throw shooters can kind of take that moment, go through their routine. That's where you see the Steve Nashes, the Steph Currys. They can stop, take a moment, go through the routine, and hit the shot. Whereas with the Giannis, a lot of times he's playing in rhythm, a lot of times he's playing in fast break. When he's getting a shot going in a game, a lot of times it's just because that's he's got a shot going that day. Whereas, he's not one of those guys that consistently can hit good shots, every game. He just kind of needs to be in a rhythm to do it. So that also plays a factor into it. But yeah, it's a lot mentality, because if you're not confident in your ability to shoot in the first place, outside of just free throws, which you see in him passing up on shots when he's wide open and when their defense is, obviously testing him.
Yeah.
That plays a factor into it then when you go to the foul line, where you're not confident in your shot to begin with. So you're not confident that you're going to be able to make this. And then you go through this long, drawn out routine that, gets you into trouble, because, it's giving you more time to get in your head with the whole thing. And it's just, it needs to be he needs to develop a quicker routine, and he needs to become more confident in his jump shot. And that will help with his free throw shooting. That's the same way that it was with every other person that's ever struggled with the free throw line. Unless they have the yips, which in sports is literally just not being able to, do something that you can do. And for some reason being in like a weird groove. Unless it's that, it's mainly mentality about, you're just not confident in being able to make the shot.
Yeah.
Even the little bit of basketball that I played, I had no problem going to the foul line, because I just did I did a same routine every single time. It was a quicker routine, and for me it was okay, this is just another shot kind of thing. Like I was confident in my shot enough that, like, when I stepped up to the foul line, it wasn't a thing in my head where I was like, oh, I have to sink these, or I have to make these, or there wasn't any pressure on you or anything like that. And sometimes, like I said, guys that play in rhythm, like Giannis does a lot of the time, it can affect guys like that when they suddenly have to stop the game, walk to the free throw line, go through a routine, and then try to hit a shot when you're not confident in your shot already to begin with.
Okay, so yeah, it could be the interruption, the change up, not actually
Yeah.
not actually just the shot itself and difficulty or anything, just kind of like going from, going 100, 100 miles an hour to like just 5, 10 and just chilling. Okay.
Yep. A lot of times that causes it too. And speaking of a even worse version of Giannis, by the way, at the foul line, oh my God, just this, it's so, it's so wild to me, because when he came out of college, even going into college, Ben Simmons was insane. Like, he went to LSU and they didn't even make the tournament, which should have maybe been a red flag to begin with, that he was a talented player that couldn't get his team to the championship,
Yeah.
or even into the tournament. That probably should have been a red flag to begin with. But man, Ben Simmons, for the love of God, Philly, just trade him. But just get
To
him out of
who?
there.
How?
Like,
For what?
there was that there was that trade that Rockets Knicks, where it was Ben Simmons straight up trade for James Harden, and that got nixed. The Rockets didn't want to do that trade, and so that was, and then James Harden ends up going to the 76er, or ends up going to the the Nets. And part of that was that the old GM for the Rockets is the new GM for the 76ers, and so they probably didn't want to do a deal with their old GM in which they thought they were losing a better player in James Harden to over for Ben Simmons. But they should have done that trade, because I guarantee you the 76ers would not have lost that series the way that they did. But yeah, it's just Ben Simmons needs to get traded. He needs to go to team. You're not going to get a spectacular return on him, because everybody knows that there's a specific way that you have to win with Ben Simmons now, and it's not the way that they've been doing it. And like, essentially the way that you have to win with Ben Simmons, which is generally what they try to do with like LeBron, they try to do it with, but LeBron's more, obviously LeBron, and can hit shots and everything and can take over games. So he's a little different, but it's the same concept where you basically just surround him with shooters. So like, for instance, if you went to the Warriors and he ran the Warriors offense with all of their shooters, he would be spectacular, and they would be spectacular, because he can facilitate and he can get some buckets, and he's an incredible defender. It's just that when you're relying on him to be one of the primary scorers, he's not gonna do that. So that's why, like, for instance, if he went to the Bulls, not to sound funny, but he went to the Bulls and just was a distributor, really purely, and defender, he would be ideal. That would be the ideal situation for him, and if the Bulls were smart, they would sign a couple of shooters then to go with him, and then you have him basically run the point and run the offense, and everybody else is just there to basically take a shot when needed. And then you have your primary and secondary scorers that aren't Ben Simmons. The problem is that the 76ers have relied strictly on Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. Problem with Joel Embiid, which you saw in this series, is he's injury prone. He has some kind of cartilage flap torn in his chest or something, and you could see that him wincing every once in a while as he ran up the field or ran up the court and everything. And a lot of times that translates into him not wanting to be down low and bang and do what centers do and dominate the way that he can. And so him kind of floating around the 3-point line trying to hit outside shots that he's not as good at as just banging down low is the problem. And then you have Ben Simmons, who literally, when you have a superstar on your team who's one of your main superstars and you can't play him in the fourth quarter, that's the problem. That's the problem. When it becomes a hack of Ben for the other team's benefit because they know that you can't hit free throws, that's a problem. Like, there's no world in which you see that with any other superstar caliber player for a team. Ben Simmons is I mean, he shot, Dylan, there's a stat he shot, I think, 3 shots in the entire fourth quarter of that entire series. 3 shots. Like, that's how bad it is.
They don't trust him. Right?
No, he's a liability. I mean, he's having him on the court. You might as well have me on the court. Like, it's that's the problem. That's why it's so bad. And so they need to get rid of him, and they need to trade him and recoup whatever they can to get him, because I think it depends. Well, it really depends on what they want to do. They can either keep Embiid and keep Ben, in which case they're going to have to change the way that they have done their offensive scheme, and they're going to have to bring in as many shooters as possible, which they just don't really have the money for, because they've given max contracts to Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris, who was basically supposed to be the third option, but at times, like, you forget that he's there. So it's just, they can keep both. They just need to immediately add all of them with a bunch of shooters around him, and good shooters.
So I mean, he's going to be a salary dump. Is that pretty much what we're at right now? Like a regular season champion, but more or less a salary dump in the playoffs?
Yeah, like, it's going to be, because he's basically one of those where you can't play him during crunch time in important situations, because the other team can A, just foul him and send him to the free throw line, or B, test him to shoot the ball. Like, it's for a defense, it's so much easier when you go, okay, this guy can't shoot, so we can leave him wide open on the line, beyond basically the key, and to the 3-point line and on. And when he drives, we just foul the crap out of him and make sure he doesn't make the shot, and he's not going to hit free throws. So it's one of those where you just go like, okay, they basically do not care about him on the court. So then you're playing 5-on-4 on defense, which is not going to work in anybody's favor if any offensive team. So that's the way that it is, and that's the way they've been playing in, you know, these important games in the playoffs. And so they either need to get rid of him, or they need to get rid of Embiid and build around him. And you can't have both unless you surround him with, you know, 8 incredible shooters that swap in.
Let's be honest, which one do you think they're going to stick with?
The sad part is I think that they're going to stick with both, and it's going to be one of those where they just try to switch it up a little and run it back, and that's going to fail, obviously. But I think if they're going to keep one, it's going to be Embiid, because Embiid is the better player, and he's also like, he should have tried a little bit more to take over and should have played through the injury better. But it's one of those where he did try at least a little bit, which was way more, and you can play him at the end of games, which is more than you could say about your other guy. So, and like I said, you can keep Ben Simmons, you just have to immediately surround him with a bunch of shooters and another really good scoring option.
Yeah.
It's going to be incredibly hard to do that in 1 or 2 off seasons, unless, you know, you're able to recoup a lot if you trade Embiid. So what's going to happen is they're going to trade Ben Simmons. The most likely situation, they're going to keep both. The better situation for their team is to get rid of Ben Simmons and recoup as much as you can for him.
Yeah. Okay. So. And we just have to, like, you got to invoke a little bit of drama here, but like, I guess I remember I saw this earlier, but it was like the Stephen A. Smith, his report was on Ben Simmons. He doesn't work, he doesn't listen, and everyone around him, his family, and he's constantly babied.
Yeah, I heard that too.
Directly, but
well, that's the other problem too. Is I like, you see him in the offseason, like, you know, you've seen these videos where you're like, oh, here's Ben Simmons hitting a 3 during offseason. And then it's one of those where it's not like he does it during the game. So what does it matter? If he's not actually putting in significant enough time to get there, then what's the point? You know, like, for example, I believe, who was it? I think was it Carlos Boozer? It might have been Carlos Boozer who, it was somebody from the Bulls took like 1,000 shots a day. Or no, it wasn't Carlos Boozer. I think it was like Chris Bosh. It was like Chris Bosh developed a 3-point shot by shooting like near 1,000 threes a day or something like that, or 1,000 shots a day. And it was one of those where, like, yeah, he became a very good 3-point shooter, and there's a reason, because he put in the time in a very short amount of time. So it's like Ben Simmons could do that if he wanted to. He just obviously is not putting in enough work. He's obviously talented enough. It's not like he can't do it, you know.
Wow, that's
so
1,000 a day.
It was something like that. It was something crazy. It was something crazy like that, where he was, I don't, maybe it wasn't Chris, but it was somebody that was like, had improved their shot a ton, or their 3-point shot a ton. And it was because of that, because they were shooting basically like near 1,000 shots a day. And that's what was helping them, which is what you need to do. I mean, that's not funny, but you're an NBA player at this point. The only downside to Ben Simmons' game is that he can't shoot for crap. That's the only downside. He's an athletic freak. He's massive. He's tall. He can finish at the rim. He can, he's an incredible defender. He's an incredible facilitator. He's a extremely above average passer. He just is such a poor shooter and free throw shooter that there's just no point in playing him when you actually need buckets.
And so that's what's always really interesting about this, is that I don't know if you know the context of, like, were they forced into maxing him, or was it like a situation where they had to? But
it's just one of those where he's a super young, talented player who, you know, it's the whole trust the process, where those few years where they were just tanking very obviously in order to get guys like this.
Yeah.
It's the same concept. It's just that those guys finally came up for contracts. And you got to remember too, that if you look at the 76ers in the way that they are, in their situation, and they're like where they were seated at that point, is you're looking at 2 young players that are super talented, and you go like, oh, they'll figure it out.
Right.
You know, they'll put in the work, they'll put in the time to figure it out. Well, one of them is doing that in Joel Embiid, and the other one is very obviously not. And so that's where their problem is. It's coming to a head in this playoffs after he's already signed a massive contract.
Yeah, and that's what I was getting at with that is that it's interesting to me that you could get to that level and not like you could solely rely on athleticism, whatever, hype potential, and you could secure the bag and get the max contract and stuff. And then there's like these reports about you don't work, you don't spend a bunch of time and stuff. I can't say as a normal person myself, I wouldn't do the same thing, but I think it's absolutely crazy that you could still get literally, I mean, until the NBA eventually removes max contracts, if they ever do, like literally the top paying in the league and max out everything based off potential and what you've shown in limited capacities. Not that you are the top of the league and max attributed player or whatever, but that much off of potential and you could plateau like you could imagine he is or below plateauing and just be fine. And he might be okay with that. That's what's crazy about it to me, is despite being in your team culture, despite being talking with your teammates every day, whatever, he might be totally fine with just being like, this is how I play, this is what it is, I'm already maxed out, whatever. And it sucks for the team, but it's a fascinating concept. I think about that a lot.
Well, and you look at, it's funny because we'll talk about them in a minute, but the Phoenix Suns are like an incredible foil for the 76ers because they're literally, they get Ben Simmons, the 76ers get Ben Simmons, who is this super young, talented guard, coming out of college. Suns get Devin Booker, who's a super talented young guard coming out of college. Now, granted, one of them is more of a facilitator than a scorer, and the other one's a scorer more than a facilitator. But the point still stands that they're a super young, talented guard coming into the league. What else do? They both get a super talented young center coming into the league. The 76ers get Embiid. The Suns get DeAndre Ayton. Well, then what happens is one of those super talented guards puts in a ton of work and a ton of time to get better and better every year. And, same with both centers. And then one of their guards that I mentioned doesn't do that and just goes continuously off of his current talent, which is, his talent is at a star level, but he's never going to be a superstar level talented player because of his lack of work that he's putting in on the crucial parts of his game that need it.
Yeah.
So, and that's the problem with Ben Simmons is you literally, what your problem is. That's the thing with Ben Simmons. He knows what his problem is. He's an incredibly gifted passer, incredible defender, incredibly athletic, could do it all, just needs to shoot and hit free throws better. And that's the case. That's the case for the last 5-6 years. So just do it. Go in the off season, work entirely on your shot every single day, put in, thousands of hours this, off season. And guess what? You'll have a much better shot come next year if you actually put in the work and time. And it doesn't seem like he ever has done that. And that's why he's going to continuously be that. And like you said, he might be just comfortable being at the current level he's at, which is unfortunate for the team he's on. Yeah. But again, you can win with Ben Simmons. It's just there's a very certain formula that you have to follow, which is that you need to surround him with a ton of shooters. And the 76ers don't have the money to do that, and they don't have the players to do that right now on the current roster. So That's the problem, is you now are basically using two superstars that aren't well suited to play with each other, and you're going to be doomed to forever make it to the playoffs and maybe win a series or two here and there, and that's it.
Yeah. So let's go from a team that seems to have dug themselves into a hole they'll never get out of to a team that looks like it's on its uprise. And that would be, of course, the Suns and the Clippers, up 2-0 right now.
Yep. And this is very surprising because I really thought that the Suns, I knew the Suns were growing the past couple of years. I knew that they were getting better and better with Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton. And going into their second year together, I knew that they were going to be improved for sure. But it was one of those where I didn't think they were going to make that much of an improvement. So I thought Chris Paul was really the keystone for it and why they were improved so much. But this series, I mean, granted, the Clippers don't have Kawhi Leonard, who's probably the best player in that series if he's healthy. And that obviously is going to change the series for sure. But the problem is that the Clippers also don't have one of their best players in Chris Paul, who's their facilitator and talent. And then now you're going to talk about how these two teams are going to go head to head, missing their two of their key players. You really think like, okay, maybe they might trade one and one, or maybe the Suns, who weren't very good last year, are going to continue or revert back to that, because that's what you've seen in the past. But the thing is that it's now become where you go, oh no, the Suns really grew as a team, and even without Chris Paul, are still a very formidable team. And yes, they are going against a injury, driven team right now in the Clippers because of losing Kawhi Leonard. But it's one of those where they're playing well together and are looking like a championship caliber team, which leads to my next point, which I think they're going to win the finals. It doesn't even matter who they go against, whether it be the Bucks or the Hawks. I think they're winning the finals, and I think it's because they're playing so incredibly well together and are playing so incredibly just well as a whole. And then
it just
on top
feels like
of
their
it,
year, doesn't it?
yeah,
The way things
I said
gone.
this. Yeah, if you look at one of our past videos on YouTube, the title of the video is "The Suns Feel Like a Magical Team This Year," or "It Feels Like a Magical Year."
You've been hitting those predictions.
Yeah, it still feels like that this year. It still feels like this is a magical year for the Suns. And if you look at the way that it's gone, going 2-0 or going up 2-0 in the series against Clippers is huge because they haven't had Chris Paul. So the fact that Chris Paul has had like a week or two of rest and is now going to come with fresh legs into a series that his team's already up 2-0 and seems to be the better team, they're probably going to sweep the Clippers. They're probably going to sweep the Clippers, and they're probably going to roll into the finals with more rest because the Bucks Hawks series is going to probably go 5 or 6 games.
Yeah.
And it's delayed past the Western Conference Finals. So because the Western Conference Finals started earlier. So that's probably what's going to happen. And if that is the case, I think the Suns roll into the finals against if the Hawks somehow figure it out against the Bucks, like I've talked about how exhausted Trae Young looks now. Just wait until if they made it past the Bucks somehow. They're gonna like collapse in the finals. It's gonna look like the Miami Heat last year against the Lakers, where they win one game because Jimmy Butler decided that he was gonna literally put every single ounce of energy and effort he had into one game, and they did it. And then the rest of the series was just like, okay, they're just a beat up team.
Right.
That's how this is gonna look. And then if you have the Bucks going in, I don't think the Bucks are yet good enough to win it, especially against a Suns team that feels very complete and feels very like destiny bound to win this series this year. So yeah, the Suns are playing incredibly well. And then you had the awesome, incredible finish yesterday, which I thought was hilarious. I saw a post that said the final 90 seconds of the Phoenix Suns game yesterday was 33 minutes of live TV or something like that.
It was that bad? I heard it was bad. How long? It was the final 90 seconds?
Yeah, the final 90 seconds. So the final minute and a half of the game lasted 33 minutes of real time.
Wow.
And it was because I guess there was five like reviews that happened. Like
Okay.
5 like actual like go to the booth and review it kind of thing.
Right.
And then you have timeouts and all that stuff that plays into factor, but in TV timeouts. But yeah, it lasted a ridiculous amount of time. And the Suns finished in one of the perfect drawn up, as perfectly drawn as it could have been, inbounds plays where you get an alley-oop off the inbound pass, 0.9 seconds left on the clock. So you either get a quick jumper, like as soon as it hits the person's hands, they have to get it out of their hands immediately, or you get something like this where going to the rim, you get an open alley-oop and you can either tip it in or dunk it in this case, where DeAndre Ayton nailed it. And it was like literally beautiful. And I know people had questions about, especially looking at this picture, like, oh, is this goaltending? No, because it was coming off of an inbounds pass. It's not a shot on the goal. And so because it's not a shot on the goal, it's not goaltending if he's touching the ball while it's still within the cylinder.
Right.
So this is still considered a pass. Whereas I think if he makes the shot, so like say that ball hits the rim and goes in on the inbounds pass, that's not considered a made basket because the ball was out of bounds to begin with. So that's the way that you kind of have to look at this, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And so that's not goaltending. He can touch the ball totally fine as long as it hasn't, hit the rim or gone in or whatever beforehand. So he grabs the ball right above the rim, slams it through, and there was probably like, I think by the time he slammed it through, there was probably like 0.2 seconds left. So he very clearly made it like through, and it was perfectly timed. That it was a perfectly drawn up play, and the execution was incredible, and it was picture-esque, and probably every organization or any basketball team in the future is probably going to refer to this play as like this is what we're going to try to, this is what we're trying to do every time we do an inbounds pass like this to get a bucket.
So my question with that is, me not knowing the knowledge or not knowing that particularly, but if he had it in his hands and he was off the ground and still like say right before he actually dunked it and the time ran out, would it still count? Does it not count?
Yeah, if the ball is touching his fingertip and the time runs out, even if he's in the air, it's game over.
Wow,
Not game over in that case. It's just that, it's game over. The dunk doesn't count.
The
ball has to leave his fingertips, whether it be because if you think about a jump shot, they're in the air on a jump shot. So it's the same concept, just in an alley-oop. So if the ball leaves the fingertips before the time runs out, the dunk counts. If the ball's still on even one part of his fingertip, then it's not.
Okay. So I want to respond to a very terrible, stupid comment that I saw because I knew you were talking about the 90-minute thing and it taking or the 90-second thing. I think it was a Rob Gronkowski tweet or something that was like, wow, they really got to shorten up, in like paraphrasing, they really got to shorten up the end of these games. They're taking forever. And people were like, oh, the final 90 seconds of like a football game lasts forever. And be like, that's not the same thing, like literally at all. One, obviously it's a completely different game. Two, there's also getting out of bounds and stuff and actually like running. The clock is an entirely separate entity as it relates to NFL football compared to basketball. There's a lot more happening usually.
Well, and the other thing too is an NBA play, if you get a quick inbounds pass and shot and he makes it, that could be like a 3-second exchange. Whereas in the NFL, like running a full play at the end of the game might take 6, 7, 8, seconds. And so, 12 seconds left on the clock in an NFL game is maybe 2 plays. Whereas an NBA clock, 12 seconds is like, oh, we could switch possessions like 3 or 4 times in this time period because one team passes it in, gets fouled immediately, 1.5 seconds comes off the clock, and then they hit 2 free throws. And then the other team gets it, calls timeout, pulls the ball. And then the other thing, too, is in the NBA, you can call timeout and advance the ball up the court. And then when that happens, they get the inbounds pass on the other side of the court on the offensive side. So then they could run a play where a guy comes off a pick, catches it from the inbounds, immediately takes a shot, makes it. And now we're talking about 2 possessions that occurred within 3.5 seconds. So that's why the NBA is very different than the NFL in that sense, because 3 possessions could occur in the same amount of time that 1 plays ran in the NBA or NFL.
But see, like your answer is never going to get the same amount of likes or like coverage on Twitter, which again, it comes up so often. I feel like we've said this a number of times in the podcast. Just don't ever read Twitter comments unless you're looking for a fight and you just want to be mad about something, which I could do frequently. Like, I'm not going to lie. I see something controversial. I'm like, I can't wait to see what's going to be said here. I know I'm going to be right. And most of the time I am, but don't ever look for an intellectual discussion and actually explaining like you just did, because restricting it to, what is it? You used to be 140 characters. Now it's longer. So bad. Terrible. Just doesn't go anywhere.
The other thing too that you have to remember is that not only is that an issue, but it's also like there's also people in the comment section that are literally posting a comment to start an argument or to say the controversial thing. So that way people get triggered. Then people respond, and then you get, where one comment leads to 40 comments later, somebody's talking about the politics of, the war going on. And you're like, all right.
And that happened in a math discussion. That was like the PEMDAS or whatever, like the order of operations and stuff. I got into a discussion with someone, and it just led, again, it was the same thing. Yeah, it was like 40 comments down and stuff. And it was just like, no. You don't do that. You've never done that. It's never been the rules. I don't know what you're being taught, but it's wrong. And they're just like, imagine following this and getting like 2 instead of 4. And I was like, it's right. It is the math. What do you mean? But yeah, then eventually, before you know it, we're talking about math, and all of a sudden it becomes a political discussion. And it's like, how did we even get here? Bots. It's always bots. There's bots. I'm sure of it. That are just designed to trigger people.
Well,
Usually, what happens.
There's that, and then, like I said, there's also the person that's just going to post a comment that they know is super controversial and going to cause an argument, and then they just put their phone down and go, I just started an argument, and then I care. And that's going to happen. And then people like us are going to be like, oh, that was so stupid. And then you're like, it pains me to read these comments and think that maybe people actually believe that this is the truth, And that's the other thing too, is there's people out there that generally believe very, very dumb things or just aren't educated, and then will say stuff as if it's fact. And then you're like, like they'll say things like, well, yeah, isn't that the guy that was arrested twice? And you're like, no, like, no, he's literally never been. Like, where did you have you always thought this? Like, did you hate this guy because of that?
Yeah.
Like, that's your opinion based on? It's just like sometimes people just aren't literally educated, and then it leads to an argument because they just don't know what they're talking
Just
about.
go to their profiles. I guarantee you, I could pick out 3 things you will always see from those type of accounts. It's pretty consistent. I've done it quite a bit this week. It's always about I just say how it is. There's sunglasses. They're bald usually. Lots of those things going on. And it's just like,
and their bio
just saying my opinion.
And their bio probably has a bunch of things. There's at least one comment in their bio where they say that they're not sorry about an opinion, or they're not, or they're gonna live their way the way that, or something. There's something like that. Like,
just living the way I like,
Yeah,
28.
It's something like that, where you're just like, okay, this person is never ever going to see the other side of the argument, and so why do I even try?
Yeah.
Like, even if you're 100% right, it's not going to happen. It's going to boil down to, well, no, I just don't like them. And you're like, okay, that's not a great answer, but thanks. Like, I understand now that I'm arguing with the wall next to me.
Yeah.
So,
Twitter desperately needs a downvote. It just does. It always has. You need to downvote stupid opinions. I'm sorry. It's a filtering tactic, and it works pretty well. But yeah, I don't know. We could probably pivot back to that discussion anyways. But first, we're going to cover the update for the Bears and the Arlington Heights Stadium. Is it happening? Apparently, they moved forward on proposals. They also talked about, I believe they agreed with a sponsor of Arlington Heights Racetrack. I think was the last thing that came up. So I don't know the level or the depth at which they usually let these things go before one side caves. I imagine it's pretty deep and it's going to go pretty far, but I don't know. I'm going back and forth on how I feel about this. You explain how you feel first, because I want to hear that side too. Do you is this something you're cool with? Do you hate it? Do you think eventually it'll work out? Do you think it's ever actually really going to happen?
Yeah. So, okay, so a couple things to think about first that put all of this in context. One, there was rumors earlier this year that the Bears were going to sell, or were really strongly considering selling. Everybody immediately went, well, that's crazy. Why would they sell? They've never, they've kept it in the family. Well, part of the thing you have to understand is that when it's in the family, and especially when it's in a family that their money isn't elsewhere. They're not the owner of the Atlanta, Falcons that owns Home Depot. Like, that's not the way that it is. They don't have billions of dollars from other enterprises that they run. Their money is in the Chicago Bears, and that's where they've made the money. So it's one of those where Virginia McCaskey right now is the owner or whatever, and the sole owner. Well, when you start breaking up the Bears and the percentage and everybody that goes and everything, the other issue too is when she passes and everything, you have to pay for property tax and all that to be transferred, and all that fun, legal battle type stuff that happens. Well, if you have billions of dollars from Home Depot, you can pay to have that property tax, squared away and done, so you can move on and keep the team. Problem with the Bears is all their money is in the team. So when they would have to suddenly pay that, there would be a massive problem. And then you also have the fact that they're getting older. All of them are getting older. You might have to break it up now suddenly amongst more people than you want. Plus the factor of everybody in Chicago is basically, crapped on your stadium for the entirety of its existence because of how annoying it is. You also are in a city that, you know, has aldermans and politicians that are, you know, we're just waiting for whenever the next politician ends up going to prison, because that's just the way it is. Every politician's that way here in Chicago.
Yeah.
So it's all of that, plus you roll it into, you know, Ted Phillips is, you know, basically been like on fire for the last like 5 years, where people are just like, you know, for the love of God, fire Ted Phillips. But he's a part of their family. You know, he's you know, a part of the McCaskey Chicago Bears family, so he gets to keep his job. So all of that plays into the context of whether or not they're going to move. The problem is that there's two things. One, yes, they do have a lease with the city. And the sad part too is, and this is another thing that people don't realize, the Bears don't own Soldier Field.
Yeah.
They don't even own their own stadium. The third largest market in the Chicago, in any sports world in the United States, doesn't own their own freaking stadium because it's owned by the Park District. And so the Bears pay rent on a lease that they have with it. You know how
They're just ahead of the curve like the rest of us. We're just going to be renting forever. They just were one step ahead.
Yeah, and then hey, remember that field that's so unbelievably poorly done in, like, you know, the late winter and everything? The Park District literally has come to the Bears ownership multiple times saying, "Hey, we'll put in any turf or new thing you want to put in," and they've been like, "No, we like our field.
Yeah.
It's an advantage." An advantage for who? What advantage for doctors that now have to fix every player's knee and ankle after playing on that field? That's who's getting an advantage in this. So that plays a factor into it. So for me, my thinking is just move, because I don't want them to renovate the stadium. I don't want them to add 30,000 more seats. I want a freaking beautiful stadium in the third largest sports market in the entire country, the team that started the freaking NFL. For the love of God, give us a stadium that I can maybe even afford to go to a game, let alone actually enjoy watching on TV without, you know, the announcers going, you know, what a cold day in Chicago with their, you know, it's so stupid. I'm tired of listening to, you know, all of that talk about the weather and how the field gives us an advantage. Yeah, okay, go ask the players whether or not they'd want to play in a beautiful dome every single day, or if they want to go play out in the negative whatever degree weather. You want to actually talk about that? Let's talk about the fact that you know, basically Ian Rappaport on Pat McAfee's podcast, when they were talking about where Tom Brady was going to be, they were talking about that issue of Tom Brady said something about the some team that was in it to the end and basically pulled out because they wanted to keep their quarterback.
49ers for sure.
Yeah, it was definitely the 49ers, 100%. But he was saying that, you know, they asked, like, oh, is it the Bears maybe? And Ian Rappaport basically said that Tom Brady had said he didn't want to play in the cold weather here. And so the Bears were never in his finalists as far as landing spots. That was like a throwaway comment that should light every Bears fan's like entire anger about the fact that our stadium is the worst stadium in the entire freaking NFL, because Tom Brady literally was like, I'd rather play in a really nice, you know, environment down in Tampa than Chicago, because I don't want to play in cold weather towards the end of the year, because he's 40 something years old. If we had a dome, you're seriously telling me that if we had a dome that we actually would be in the finalists for getting Tom Brady simply because we didn't have an outdoor stadium and we have an indoor? That's part of the problem. Like,
yeah,
you know, do players, like, why do players not want to stay in Cleveland? Why do players not want to go to the frickin' Cincinnati? Because it's cold. Cincinnati doesn't even have an indoor training field. Like, they don't even have an indoor facilities as far as practicing. It's just like, it's a joke. Nobody wants to be out in the cold. Nobody actually like enjoys being out in the -5-degree weather during the winter. And, you know, oh, it's that Bear defense, so built different. And it's like, yeah, okay, well, how many Super Bowls has that won us? One. So when that starts winning, you know, 3, 4, 5 Super Bowls, you know, let me know. Then, yeah, I'll support the fact that defense wins championships. But when I'm watching, you know, Patrick Mahomes and that offense versus Tampa Bay and that offense in the Super Bowl, both have, you know, basically serviceable defenses that are kind of average defenses win Super Bowls, then you can tell me that, you know, that we should probably switch to an offense that actually is better rather than our defense being the sole purpose in a cold frickin' stadium in an open dome. We're never going to get a Super Bowl. We're never going to have the draft. We're never going to have like a WWE event. Like we're never going to have any of that in Soldier Field. And do you know how many Super Bowls would be played if the Bears built a new dome in Chicago? A ridiculous amount.
Oof.
The NFL would be like literally like every year it'd be like who's going to get the Super Bowl, and then it would suddenly pop up as Chicago, and you're like, wow, Chicago got the Super Bowl again for the 6th time in a row, and the NFL and Roger Goodell are like, yeah, we're making a lot of money. Like that's the way that it's going to be. Like it's literally the 3rd largest sports market. It's the largest sports market that doesn't have 2 teams. It's the 3rd largest sports market in the country as far as like fan base and everything. And we also have like the most dedicated fans where, we're all idiots and we show up to games even if our team sucks. So that's just like, and then on top of it, like I can go to Ohio State and they have 40,000 more seats in the stadium than the Bears. Like that's a joke.
Yeah.
Like, it's just stupid. I mean, we have the same amount of seats as like majority of colleges. Like that's, nobody's filling the stadium to go see Tulsa, but they would fill the stadium to go see the Bears and they would fill it if it was 30,000 more seats.
Yeah.
And I heard that this whole thing might be like a tactic, like coming in, like being like, hey, we'll buy the Arlington property. You better build us more seats on the stadium. No, the stadium is built on 12 acres. Do you know how many acres the Los Angeles Rams new stadium is built on? 120.
Really?
126 acres, I'm pretty sure is what it's built on. You know how many acres are at the Arlington Heights one? It's like 130. It's like something like that. You could build a massive facility that everybody would love. And not only that, but you would be the Chicago Bears with the nicest stadium in the team that built the frickin' NFL and the 3rd largest market, and you'd actually get Super Bowls. Like it's just
plus they got that cool turf thing where they could bring it outside and grow it and bring it back in. That'd be great for the Bears. Like if they want to keep the turf or they want to keep the the grass, great. Now you can move it in and out. You got concerts, whatever, you got soccer games, boom, move that artificial turf in, put the grass back in for football games if you want it. That'd be cool.
And here's another thing too. For all the people that are arguing out there that Soldier Field has any type of historical significance, my grandfather, the only Bears games he ever went to was in Wrigley Field. So don't tell me that Soldier Field has this such historic thing where, I heard one guy make an argument that like, oh, Walter Payton played his entire career on Soldier Field. Is that? And it's like, no, nobody thinks about the field that Walter Payton was running on. Everybody thinks about the fact that Walter Payton was an incredible and amazing and probably the best football player of all time. Nobody thinks about the fact that he was running on the historic Soldier Field. That crappy place that only has 60,000 seats and is a terrible field and everything. He probably ran for more yards if he was running in a dome. Like it's just so. It's just so stupid. It's like the arguments that people are making. I do understand. The one argument that I will give people on that side is that there is something about a stadium being in the city rather than being a little bit further out. Yeah. That's fine. I get that argument. There's really no good argument against that. I understand that the city atmosphere is way different than being out in a burb. But the thing is when all of the other elements of it suck, you should probably just go with the option that doesn't suck nearly as much as your current stadium does.
Yeah. So
that's my side.
Before I give you my side, I wanted to tell you, because you brought up the finance side of it and how the McCaskies aren't as rich as, like, they're not liquid rich as other owners and stuff are. So I just want to tell you something that I learned just recently that seems like it probably should have been more obvious, but it's very cool to know, which is, how everyone's always like, oh, okay, like we got to find a way to like tax the rich, tax income specifically, all that stuff. And people are like, oh, okay, well, it's actually rich people don't pay themselves on income. They gain capital gains. They have different investments. They find ways to harbor taxes, all that stuff. Another cool thing that I learned about that rich people can do that I did not know was that they can actually make situations easier for themselves by going ahead and taking out loans against their own wealth, because their collateral is effectively, in the case of billionaires, unlimited. And you could pretty much just, if you have issues or anything or something, you run up your debt. You can actually forgive. I mean, like, I think it's also more tax deductible as well. I didn't get the whole tax side of it as well. But basically, you can use yourself as collateral, and you have even less penalties if you front to the cash yourself. So that was a really fun thing that I learned I didn't really know about until just recently. And also a thing that they do all the time.
Yeah, that's like, Jeff Bezos, for example, goes and buys a $750 million boat or whatever the hell that thing was. He doesn't, he's not buying that out of his own money. He's taking out a loan to buy it. And then the loan place goes, oh, this is a big loan. And he goes, yeah, but I'm Jeff Bezos, I'm good for it. And then they go, yeah, you're right. And then guess what? Jeff Bezos pays himself a measly $83,000 salary from Amazon as the CEO, claims that as his main source of income because the rest of his stuff is in stocks and, all these loans that allow him to keep the money. But he knows that at any point he could liquidate some of those stocks and pay off the loans. But instead, what he does is he uses the $83,000 that he makes as his income, uses that to pay some, the loans and stuff like that. And then guess what? Now you're no problem, no questions asked, get whatever you want without accruing any more income that would basically allow taxes and stuff to go, hey, that's taxable income. Instead, you go, well, I only make $83,000 a year. And it's like, well, we know you're worth, way more than that. You just don't have it in liquidized, funds and, things that you can see that are tangible.
And that's amazing because, like, I'm not even going to front anyone else being like, oh, okay, like, oh, well, I knew that the entire time. It's amazing. The average person doesn't know that. Even that surface level thing you can explain in 2 minutes is so far beyond anyone else, like, discussing things usually in the average, the average discussion about income taxes and stuff. That's kind of scary. People are like, oh, we'll just give him the highest income tax bracket and we'll raise that up on his percentage and then we'll be good to go. Like, no. Again, the loan thing is amazing. I did not know that. I didn't know that was the primary method for it. I knew all about the capital gains, but wow, amazing. So it's just another reason why that's broken, but yeah.
Yeah, they just take out loans. They just, and then what do you do if you have a loan that you need to pay off? Just take out another loan.
Yeah, because I'll cover it. Yeah, of course I will be able to.
They know you're good for it.
Yeah. In the meantime, I'll just take, I'll pay the loan and whatever, basically, especially with money being as cheap as it is right now. I don't care about the interest rate. I'm going to make so much more with this other money that I don't have to give you in liquid cash right now because I'm going to have so many investments that I can front that I'm going to literally pay off this I could pay it off entirely, like in the next year or two. And I don't have to because I have the loan. Just crazy. Yeah. But on the top,
all of the debt that Jeff Bezos has right now, which is probably significant, he could pay off in a moment if he wanted to, if he started liquidating all of his stocks and all the options and whatever else he has. Plus, the offshore bank accounts that all the people say that they don't exist and they don't have. Yeah. He can also liquidate that and then immediately pay off any loans and have billions to spare. It's just he doesn't need to do that because the loan companies are like, hey, we know you're good for it. You're Jeff Bezos. And he's like, yeah, I am. Give me another $700 million loan. And they're like, okay, great. Yeah. Like, and that's what happens. And then he can claim that as, hey, look, IRS, look at all the debt I have. And I'm only making $83,000 as an income from the company as a CEO. And, obviously the normal human being goes, yeah, but you're Jeff Bezos. You own a company. You're rich. Well, the tax, the actual written code in the tax and everything and the way that it's written basically says, well, no, actually, if you look at him, he's got a ridiculous amount of debt and only like, $100,000 in, taxable income. And then you wonder why, people aren't getting taxed nearly as much. And then a lot of the profits too, they can get moved to where they're, basically making those profits offshore, which isn't in the US. And then, that's also not something that they need to like represent or, basically show that they made those profits because it's not within the US. And so it's not within a taxable, area.
All the companies that are incorporated in Denmark and everything.
Yeah,
or wherever
that's it.
else it is.
Yeah, they just claim the income or the profit in a country that has a lower tax rate, and then bam, there you go. Now you have lower. Now you pay very few taxes to another country even on all your income rather than paying it to the U.S. where your main source of profit and everything is based.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. Didn't know
Mhm.
that. Just another thing that I was more or less fascinated by. That's just very,
Yep,
wow,
it's
very cool.
yeah, it's one of those fun. And they actually, I know they just came out with an article. The New York Times, if anybody wants to read it, just came out with an article about this, kind of going through and breaking it down for like guys like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and all them. The debt that they accrue while also being as rich as they are and paying as little taxes as they do. That's you can read all about how they actually do it. And the other thing too is when you're that rich, you can pay a lawyer to basically figure that all out for you, and
Oh yeah,
that's all it takes. And whereas a normal person doesn't have that afforded to them, so a normal person has no idea how they're able to write off everything that the rich know how to do, or can
yeah.
at least pay to have done.
And
So
banks love that too because they're like, damn, I'm gonna get like 2-3% back, and it's like effectively guaranteed because it's you. Like, of course we're gonna keep on loaning you out this money. Why wouldn't we? It's
yeah,
practically free
Jeff
money.
Bezos. If Jeff Bezos, and we're using him as an example because he's one of the most recognizable rich people in the world, and there's a lot of rich people in the world that don't aren't in social media or aren't widely recognized. There's plenty of billionaires in the world that do not have any type of social recognition. So we're mentioning Jeff Bezos as a prime example just to show it, but go for the top left, by the way.
Yeah,
um that's just unfortunately the way that it works, though, and that's the way the world works, is that a lot of those guys just accrue debt and the bank knows that they're good for it. And so as long as they keep making payments with a little bit of interest on those massive loans, they don't care, because at some point they're going to get their money because they know that they can get it, because they know that they're good for it. And then it's a cycle that just keeps repeating and repeating and repeating. And people like us who don't make anywhere near a blink in their eye as far as money or income has no idea that this is occurring, because there's it's happening behind closed doors, or it's happening on a daily basis where we're not it's like like the like Congress. People generally don't know what Congress is voting on day to day. They vote on stuff all the time day to day. Same with the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court sees cases all the time. You don't hear about it, the day to day stuff. You only hear about the noteworthy massive bills that are being voted on or stuff like that. You also don't even know what's in the bills that are being voted on. Of course, there's many different facets. It's the same thing with this concept of you don't know what is happening in that world because we're just not a part of it. We don't exist in that realm.
yeah, no. Yeah, that's just another wonderful thing to always be constantly aware of and never
Yeah.
be a part of. It's a big club and we're not part of it. But
Yep.
yeah, as for my take on the actual stadium,
I was gonna say, let's bounce back to.
yeah,
I was like, went into a very depressing argument.
yeah,
Not argument, but depressing conversation. Now let's shift back to the
yeah.
Bears.
I mean, so okay, what were my other points on this as well? So I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Bears lease is till 2033. I think there's a buyout clause. I don't remember the buyout clause. The number that's coming to my head right now is 8 mil to buy out of it. That seems too low. Maybe it's 8 billion. I don't know.
I think 8 million. I think the number you're getting 8 million. I think is the rent per year.
Okay. Okay.
I think it's like 6 to 8 million is what they pay in rent. Which, by the way, is also another no feather in the cap of them leaving, because if they actually had to just pay 6 to 8 million a year in rent costs to not be in the stadium and to have it until that lease is up, like putting an extra 30,000 seats in a brand new stadium in Arlington Heights is going to pay for that alone. So that's another feather in the cap, by the way, before you continue on with your point.
And so on top of that, another thing I also didn't know until the story came out is that anything like concessions, like anything that's really sold, I think, inside of the stadium, that all goes to the city of Chicago too. That the McCaskies don't see that. And if they do, it's a very small percentage of that. So they don't see that as well. There's a lot of benefits for them leaving. I guess there's also rumors that, hey, maybe they'll sell to someone who has an obscene amount of money, like a Jeff Bezos, who's rumored to be interested in NFL teams and confront the money for this, $5-6 billion stadium and all the renovation and everything.
Wouldn't be opposed to that.
Yeah, I can't say I would be opposed to that because, like they're psychopaths and everything. They'll put people in charge who actually will get things done and see results for their, nothing other than return on investment.
Well, think about it this way. If Jeff Bezos wants to get involved in the NFL or wants to own a team, it might be a business venture and that's what he's doing. But the fact that he retired tells me that it's more about the fact that he just actually enjoys football too, probably. And that's why he wants to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Which is the same thing you say with the Clippers. The Clippers had a terrible owner. I don't even remember what his name is because he was just awful. I mean, he was the guy that was racist, but then would have black girlfriends and stuff, and be openly racist. It was weird. It was like a weird situation. He was terrible. Well, then what happens is this God, I can't remember his name now. Names are escaping me. I'm always Steve Ballmer. Steve Ballmer ended up buying the Clippers, and he loves basketball, and basically was like, "All right, here you go. You can have all the money and resources you guys need to succeed." And now they're in the Western Conference Finals with two superstars. Yeah, one of them's injured, but they have two superstars on the team, which is better than what they were doing before. So, that's also the facet I think about too. Is like if Jeff Bezos genuinely likes football, which is where I think is the case, and that's why he's wanting to get involved. I would absolutely love for him to become the owner of the Bears because it would be a ridiculous amount of money thrown at a team that he now is like, oh, this is my new toy. I love this. I want it to succeed. For the love of God, make that happen.
Yeah. And so another thing that was that I also saw too is that there's only 5 teams in the NFL that actually own their entire stadium outright. So it would be very interesting to see them actually go ahead and purchase everything and do that on their own. But again, depends where they're at. If they're going to end up staying with these, like if they're going to end up staying with the McCaskies, or they're looking to sell and cash out. I mean, like if they end up, like you said, if they end up buying their own stadium and building it and everything, like that's obviously going to be a cash cow down the line because you're in the Midwest. You're X number of minutes. I think it's like a 45-minute drive or something from Chicago. Yeah, you're going to be able to host WWE. You're going to be able to host like the Super Bowl. You're going to be able to, there's so many things you could do with the dome. I personally, of course, would love them to have a retractable roof and always play with it open if possible. That'd be great.
Yeah, that would be ideal too. You don't even have to make it a full dome permanently.
Yeah, no, you can. I mean, and it's a standard that they should be able to have that. I mean, like the area popping up around it would be kind of cool too. But like you said, that's the number one thing I was going to start off with too is that like the stadium atmosphere being downtown and also the infrastructure to get people from Chicago to there. It doesn't really exist. If it does, what it does exist right now is not good enough. So there'd have to be a huge investment in that as well. I would miss the city energy. That is very cool. The number of times I have been down there for a game is minimal, but it's very cool to be able to walk from your parking garage or wherever else with all the fans and stuff up to the stadium. That's pretty cool. However, in the grand scheme of things, in the terms of the NFL and where the Bears sit in terms of stature, like, the smallest stadium in the NFL, oldest, you got the whole alien ship landing in middle of the Coliseum type of thing, lost their landmark status. Yeah. All those things on top of that. Yeah, I get seeing the history and stuff go away. That's bad and everything. I don't know. It's not as bad as Candlestick Park, like being so far from San Francisco, like the 49ers. It's somewhere in between, and there's so much you could do with all that space, and you could bring it out, and maybe it could be more affordable. I probably won't be, but you can get more fans in there. I don't know. It would be very cool. I was thinking the same thing as you. If you did a pros and cons list, the losing the stadium energy is like the con. Everything else looks like a pro at this point. It's a big one. Don't get me wrong, but in terms of like fan experience and everything, I gotta say it's probably better. I mean, like still football games on TV, it's hard to beat that a lot of the time. But being in person, it's its own experience in itself. So. Yeah, I don't know.
The other thing too that you have to factor in is that we talked about at the very beginning of this that I mentioned that they were potentially looking to sell the team, as a conversation that they were having. And so if you buy the Arlington Heights property and you go, hey, we have this massive property. Now you can sell that to a team or sell that to a new owner where you go, hey, not only do you get the Bears, but you also have this brand new property that you can build a massive stadium on and is ready to, or you can, negotiate with the city to keep the current stadium and improve it. So
Yeah.
gives a new owner options if they are actually genuinely looking to sell the team, which is
Yeah.
also another potential motivation for why they're doing this.
No, definitely. And I'm going to quickly refill my drink and use the bathroom really quick. So I'm just going to transition to this very quickly and be right back in like 2 minutes.
All right.
BRB.
Okay. So I have the audience. This is the moment where, since Dylan is gone, I just start talking about what I'm drinking because that's always the fun thing to go. So right now I'm actually drinking something new that I've never had before. I've been on a seltzer kick this year, not only because I'm trying to lose weight and seltzers are just better for you than, beer and all that, but I am also enjoying seltzers a lot for kind of like the, I don't know, summer vibe that I get from them. I actually didn't really like seltzers ever before, and I've actually been on like an IPA kick before I suddenly went on this seltzer kick. But I've been drinking a lot of seltzers, and so right now I'm drinking the Seagram seltzer, which is a different one that I haven't tried yet. If anybody in the comments or on YouTube or even in the chat now or wherever you're going to hear this wants to mention a couple to suggest, I've had all the normal stereotypical ones, the White Claws, the Bud Light ones. These are the ones I'm trying now. I am also have been I was just trying this, which is not really a seltzer. It's more of it's a vodka and soda, sparkling water kind of thing. These High Noons is what they're called. This is what I'm also drinking. These are actually really good. No added sugar, 100 calories. It's funny because when I've been drinking seltzers now, I've noticed that the flavors that I like in seltzers are not the stereotypical flavors I thought I would have liked. Because I'm a big, fruit fan. Like I love fruity drinks. I love also just fruit in general. So like I'm a pina colada guy. I don't care what you think about that. I'll drink pina coladas all day, every day. They're great. So I thought, oh, I'm gonna love like all of the mango, the peaches, the strawberries, the watermelons of the seltzer world. And I found that that is not the case, and that actually my favorite seltzers are like the black cherry, the blackberry, like the, I don't know, just heavier ones is I guess the words I'll use. Which is interesting because like I said, I never would have thought in a million years that those would have been the types of seltzers I like. Those are the flavors that I actually enjoy. So yeah, so if anybody has any recommendations on maybe some smaller known seltzers or just in general, I am really starting to kick of those. This one is a mango peach, which is not really that bad actually. The one I had before was that High Noon vodka soda, which was like a grapefruit. That one's pretty good. So I've been happily surprised by all that. Sorry, I just I was transitioning to the when you disappear and I have the podcast on my own, I just start talking about what I'm drinking. And so that's what I was just talking about. So we had a moment, talked about that, and now we reel it back into sports world and the topic that you see now on your screen, which is something that is very, very underrepresented in sports and something that is not talked about in sports as much as it should be. It's almost kind of like military-esque of the like that
Don't ask,
say,
don't tell policy.
yeah, exactly. Don't ask, don't tell. And it's kind of a weird thing. And like locker rooms are weird in general. They're just always odd because it's just a bunch of dudes from different, even in it doesn't matter what it is. A women's locker room, men's locker room. It's just a bunch of people with different backgrounds playing, having one commonality, which is the sport that they're playing. And then of course you get a bunch of different ideas and concepts. And, then of course there's also the idea that people don't like sports being mixed with any type of political issues or any type of religious issues or anything. And people just, have the opinion of, "Oh, I just want to watch my sports. I don't want any of that in it too." And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, dude, like these are famous people and famous athletes that are going to use their platforms to, talk about whatever issues they want to talk about or address anything that they want to address. And I'm all for that. I'm okay with that. I don't mind when, they do that. I can disagree with them. I can agree with them. It's up to me. I can also just enjoy sports and know that, I'm enjoying the game. And then also the athletes can have a voice because they're human beings. So that's fine. In this case, this is one of those stories where Carl Nassib, I really apologize if I'm saying the name wrong, but I'm just going to say Carl Nassib came out in I believe it was an Instagram live video saying that he was gay and that he was comfortable with coming out, and that he wanted to also make $100,000 donation to the
Trevor Project.
Foundation. Yeah, the Trevor Project Foundation, which is helping for suicidal awareness, as well as help in that department as far as LGBTQ members that typically are in like the very high bracket for that as well. There's a literal very high suicide rate, as well as just self-harm or just rate amongst the LGBTQ based on what they have to deal with, and obviously trying to figure out themselves in a world that sometimes pushes back as hard as it possibly can, which sucks and is unfortunate. And me and you are not obviously a part of the LGBTQ, but we try to stay as educated as possible, or at least I do as well. And
The
so it's
boring
one of those.
side.
Yeah, exactly. So we try to stay as educated as possible. Obviously, you can't understand somebody's, what they're going through or what they have gone through or what, they go through on a daily basis in that world. But I try my best to. And for him, I'm very happy that he was comfortable enough to speak up about it. I wish that this would happen more often, because I know that more of this exists in athletes. I know there's more athletes out there that are definitely, either closeted or afraid to talk about it because of the situations they're in. And like I said, it's a very harsh world in the sports world where it's very intolerant to things like that in some ways. Now, I know a lot of athletes were coming out in support, and that's fantastic and that's great. And that's what I was really hoping to see when this news broke. I was really hoping to see a lot of the support from athletes within the sport, because a lot of times people don't want to speak up and support somebody like that comes out and speaks like this. And the other thing too that I read or heard was, which I'm not 100% sure on, but I'm sure it does impact it, is that having a figure that somebody who is coming out can look to, or kind of put a name to, actually improves their success of transitioning into their new life by like 85%, or becoming comfortable with it by 85% or something like that, which is insane. So which makes sense why we need to continue to have this open discussion and to continue to have athletes like this that come out, that put a name out there that you can look up to. And I thought, which was another great thing, was his jersey was the number one selling jersey the last few days, which is awesome as well, because that means that that's not only a support from the league and the players in the league, but it's also support from fans as well, which is great and awesome to see. And I feel as though the world is finally starting to get to a point, at least in the sports world, where it's a little bit more acceptable to be, in that department. And so I'm happy that that's the case. And I'm happy that I hope, obviously you don't know until you play and everything, and, his day-to-day interactions with other athletes. And I'm sure there's people that are going to come at him specifically for that. I'm sure there's a guy
yeah.
in the league that's going to hit him at one point harder than he'll hit anybody else, because he's targeting him for what he just the unfortunate target that he put on his back, and that's by coming out. And like I said, as unfortunate as that is, that's a part of sports, and it's a part that we would like to remove from sports. So I really do commend him and am grateful for him and his courage, and actually being able to come out as an active NFL player. I know Michael Sam before him had also come out as a part of the draft process. Michael Sam, unfortunately, probably also opportunity met with that as well, but not being afforded maybe opportunities that other players might get as well. But his talent didn't meet the him being able to play in the NFL at the same time as being as coming out. And so it's great that that is the case for Nassib, and I wish the best of luck for him next year. And from all accounts that I've heard, he's a hardworking guy who everybody in the locker room loves, and there's never been an issue with him on the field, off the field. So I'm really happy for him that he's comfortable enough to come out. That's another thing that we want to reiterate, is that for him to be in the mindset and comfort within himself to come out with this information is huge. So that's really great. And I'm glad that he's enjoying himself, hopefully, and hopefully continues to in the NFL.
Yeah, and preliminarily, if you, I don't know if you've seen it yourself, but I also watched it. If you want to see a very good take on this as well, you could also look up Pat McAfee's take, which for all the bro culture and stuff that I really can't watch the full show anymore. That was a very good take. He actually walked through everything very well and kind of debunked against, like I was holding the same opinions of things where people are like, oh, well, why do we need to know about this? Like, it just don't talk about it, and it doesn't become a thing we worry about anymore, which is blatantly false. And again, like the statistic you talked about has proven that to be false time and time again. It doesn't work like that. It has never worked like that. Yeah, he handled that very well. Very good to watch. I would watch that as well. Yeah, basically everything you had said about it already. I'd say on top of that, the statistic that you brought up as well, I had seen that, and then he brought that up as well, is just damning. That's crazy. And I can totally understand where that comes from, and also why that's important, and actually to, make this a public thing and, have a role model to look up to and everything. It's a crazy transition. Like, it's a crazy transition from, like an 85% or whatever that you mentioned beforehand. Yeah, that's crazy too. And you talked about the Michael Sam situation. I mean, like, obviously he wasn't like a world beater or anything. I think what really helps about this is that Carl is also a really, really good player on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be a game changer. And like you said, he's already had years and he's a veteran in the league and everything. And people have had always super high opinions of him. So that makes a huge difference. That's going to have staying power. He's not going anywhere anytime soon. And he's had a bunch of people come out and support him, which is great. And I'm sure there'll be more. So it'll keep on coming out. A couple of things I heard about him and learned about him as well is that apparently he was a star on Hard Knocks not too long ago. That's where people came to really know him and why they were like, oh, of Hard Knocks fame and everything. And that was a little bit more of an inside look into the locker room. And he apparently is really into investing his money as well as like being financially savvy with all of his earnings and all that. And I think he was on CNBC for an interview that I had watched on him once as well. But obviously, very smart person. He brought that up multiple times on how he handles everything, and he seemed to know and have a good head on his shoulders. And basically taking the time to come out on Instagram Live and all that and make that announcement is... I'm curious to see exactly what was maybe he saw a statistic like that. I'm always curious, like, when people decide now is the time, and like what is going to make a difference, like as of now is between beforehand, years ago, whatever it may be in the future. I'd be kind of curious. I don't think that was really brought up, but obviously now is great. It's always gonna be better to hear about that stuff earlier, but I was just kind of curious about exactly where that came from. And yeah, you're right. How he will be treated in the league, I am sure there will be burned tape somewhere in the NFL mic'd up's locker room and stuff of like people specifically attacking him and targeting for that.
Yep.
If you have a situation where someone specifically is trying, if like you have a Ndamukong Suh situation or whatever, like a twisting of the ankle or injuries and stuff like that, blackballed from the league, like suspended the rest of the year, like that has to be dealt with immediately. That has to be immediately targeted as like one of the worst things you do. It's literally a hate crime, but it's on the field and the guys of football. So I'm curious to see how that goes.
Not only that, but you're in a sport where you can target somebody aggressively, and it's not going to be seen as you can do it in a way that it won't be seen as egregious because it's football and it's an aggressive sport. So it's one of those where, yes, if you see somebody chopping at his knees or something like that, like an offensive lineman, as he's coming off the edge or something of that nature, or just even like, somebody getting that needs to be nipped in the butt like hard. And other players need to continue to vocalize support for him in those types of situations. Like if something does arise like that, where it's noticeable that he's being targeted or something like that, or somebody notices it enough, not only does the NFL need to crack down on it, but athletes also need to vocalize their support yet again for him in that situation, because the real big issue is that the NFL can do what they want as far as punishment, and media and people can say what they want as far as that goes. But to actually change the locker room, you have to have respectable star players that have the talent as well as the notoriety in order to hold the respect of players below them, to, you know, in order to change their opinions. So that's the type of thing that needs to happen too, is there needs to be continued support within the community for him. And so far there has been in the initial, you know, him coming out in the video, there has been a ton of support, which I was really happy about, like I said. And that's huge in kind of nipping this in the butt in the sports world, because people in the locker rooms have their own mindsets and agendas and everything. And the only way that you're going to change that is by making it where it's not okay. Like, that's not an okay thought in the locker room, because the leaders of the teams in the locker room and the guys that have the talent and respect of the league are speaking out against, you know, that type of hate and everything. That's what's going to change locker rooms to be accepting of it all. And so that's what's going to need to happen. So I could hope, like I said, I hope there's continued support for him and players vocalizing if there's any type of incident that pops up in the future around him.
Yeah, and like you said too, there's so many accounts of it's mostly after the fact retirement and everything, but like there are so many people that never came out, like in like sports leagues and stuff. You just don't hear about them because they're not at the forefront of like whatever's going on in the headlines at that point. I mean, you're retired, maybe it's like 10, 20 years later, but then like, oh, there was such a cool story. There was I can't remember the player who it was. I should, but I know it was related to Lombardi. I think it was. Oh God, there was something. I think it was either his brother or something that was related to him. I think he was gay in like this is really old 1940s 50s or something. Time period might be off. Really old, anyways. But yeah, so Lombardi had a player on the team. I think everyone had acknowledged like he's not like he wasn't going to come out or anything, but everyone was just kind of aware of it, and he made a very strong stance even then, like which was obviously, I mean, like what's changed in 5 years? Imagine taking 50 years on top of it. Completely different world, to say the least, and was just like, yeah, we're not gonna bother, you know, like I swear to, like if we ever hear anything else about this, or this is like an issue or someone has a problem with it, like come to me about it. Super hard stance on it. Very cool to see. I always think about if it's going to be like the Hallis Trophy or whatever for the Super Bowl and Lombardi. That made a very strong point of like, yeah, Lombardi obviously was a great choice for the namesake of everything. That was just a cool story that I'd seen on the side.
Great leader.
Yeah, that stuff again. If we're talking about, I'm sorry, the time period, 1960s, 1950s, but again, completely different world to have that stance and that view and to command that level of respect, where people are just like, oh okay, all right, this is what we do, this is what we're doing.
Well, and that's
legendary.
That's what I mean. It's going to take people like that, you know, like the fact that like a JJ Watt or like those type of guys are speaking out in support for him is huge, because those are the guys that like nobody in the locker room can say anything to JJ Watt. Nobody in the locker room can. So if JJ Watt says something, you have to respect it, because, you know, what are you going to do? Question him? Like it's JJ Watt. Like he's, not only is he as big of a name as he is, but he also backs it up with the fact that he's one of the best defensive players in the league. So that's the way that it needs to go, and that's why there needs to be continued support, and I hope that there is. And I was very happy to see the support that was already present. But again, you know, obviously we're talking about a greater issue when there's a person and human being that needs to, you know, that is at the center of it. And so not only are we talking about this issue and hope that everything goes smoothly, but I'm also just, like I said, glad that he was comfortable enough to come out with this on a live. And if he's, you know, hopefully and ideally, if he's at a position where he was comfortable enough to do that, then it means that he's comfortable enough with his own skin. And that's great. And I hope that he has a great rest of his career. And I hope the support continues. And I hope that it makes it a lot more, you know, of a comfortable world for other players to do the same and follow suit.
Yeah, I honestly don't think it probably will have like a massive triggering effect of different people coming out across the league. It'd be cool if it did. I feel like if I had to bet, I would think it's going to be a gradual thing, maybe in like a few years or something. Like I don't expect a bunch of people to come out and before the season, during the season, and be like, oh, because Carl came out, I'm also coming out right now too. That would be cool. I think that's a little bit of an optimistic view, but definitely you have to start somewhere and place the first brick, and I think that absolutely did. It absolutely did do that. So I think we'll see the effect in a few years and everything. So very cool. Congrats, and turn off your Twitter comments. That's what I have to say to that.
Yeah,
very
100%.
stupid ones for that. Going.
Oh God, yeah.
Very dumb ones,
So.
but they're trolls anyways, mainly bots. But yeah, let's again, like you said, it wouldn't be a Dylan podcast if we didn't go over what the Bears were doing. We got our Justin Fields hype piece. You got your little needle. You could just inject straight into your veins about what's going on. So this was just a quote that was taken out of here that was just about basically Justin Fields talking trash to the defense from one of the rookies, just a cornerback. So love to see that. Never gonna say anything else about that being bad. And also another positive news to put on top of that is that Zimmerman, I've seen this guy a couple of times, Bill Zimmerman, not a great profile picture for him, but he said that Eddie Goldman will be reporting to training camp on time. So two fantastic pieces of news.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, Eddie Goldman, we've talked about, you saw the Bears last year. You know that the Bears' biggest defensive issue last year was the fact that they couldn't stop the run if Akeem Hicks wasn't in the center. And so when he was unhealthy for a little bit there, or wasn't playing as well, or was, out of the play, the run was to the left and he was to the right. Suddenly they were able to run the ball over us. Part of that problem is the fact that he wasn't there. So it's one of those where, I'm glad that he's going to report on time because that was going to be an issue and everything. By the way, I bring up if you want to look up the Zobrist picture.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Bring that up next because that'll be a fantastic story. Anyways, yeah, no, Goldman is being back is huge because that helps to certify that you're going to be able to actually stop the run because you're going to get your nose tackle back to go along with Akeem Hicks, and Bilal Nichols, who played it well, can actually go back to where he was before, which is on kind of the right end, not defensive edge, but end side, and he'll flourish much better there. Not only that, but he'll also just be able to reach his potential like we saw the previous 2 years before, when he wasn't asked basically to suddenly become a nose tackle when he wasn't. So the fact that we're going to get our nose tackle back is huge. I'm glad that he's back. I hope he's in shape, or at least near being in shape, because he doesn't really have to be there yet. We have 2 months before the season starts, so he can get into shape in those 2 months. As long as he's near that. I have heard in the past that he's a very, very hard worker, and so that's one of those where I think he'll be fine, which is great to hear that he's coming back and make it on time. The Justin Fields stuff on top of that is also fantastic because it just shows more and more how excited I am for Justin Fields. And the fact that, too, the other thing that I've heard a lot about, which is awesome, is that Andy Dalton has been an incredible sport basically about it all, and has really taken Justin Fields under his wing a decent amount. As far as, they said there was times where he actually stayed out with Justin Fields instead of going into the stadium or into the facility. He stayed outside and watched Justin Fields make throws and then suggest maybe tips and stuff like that and what he was doing wrong or what he needed to improve upon, which is fantastic because Andy Dalton, was a playoff caliber quarterback and has been around. So he knows, he understands little, facets of the NFL that a rookie quarterback doesn't know just yet. So being able to get that kind of instruction, as well as a guy who understands that, because that's the other thing too that I've kind of found in the understanding that I don't think people have really talked about, is Nagy claiming that Andy Dalton was the starter from day one and still holding fast on that. Another asset or facet of that people don't realize is that basically says to Andy Dalton, hey, you're the starter, this is your job to lose, kind of thing. If you're playing super well the whole season, you'll keep your job, so it's on you, which makes it that way he's not resenting Justin Fields, because Justin Fields is there to push him, and Andy Dalton should want that competition. He's an NFL quarterback, he should want that type of competition. But it's one of those where he's not going to resent Justin Fields because it's a competition or he's going to lose his job before the week even starts, or the season even starts. Instead, Andy Dalton knows he's the starter. He's going into it as a starter, and it's his job to lose, which is the way that it should be for if you want like a tandem of a veteran quarterback really taking a rookie under his wing. And that's how it's worked out. And I think that's part of why Nagy is staying steadfast on the fact that Andy Dalton's the starter, is to really make sure that it's a very clear, like, hey, Justin, you're here to learn. You're here, that's what you should be preparing for, is to learn and to do as much as you can to get better. And then Andy, it's your job to lose. And that's great. I think that honestly, I've come around to that idea where I'm okay with that. Now, do I think that Andy Dalton should play the entire season? No, unless Andy Dalton is, having a freaking career year and is lighting it up, which at that point, every Bears fan is going to be ecstatic because they're like, hey, we have Andy Dalton who's lighting it up. And then we also have another quarterback who's learning the entire time, that's like literally the perfect situation. But yeah, at some point, we know Andy Dalton's probably going to get, he's probably going to end up handing the mantle over to Justin Fields. And so right now I'm totally okay with it being a very clear, hey, you're the starter and it's your job to lose. And hey, your job as a rookie is to learn and, develop and learn the offense. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I think someone else mentioned it in a Reddit thread here, but that sort of attitude or that moxie with like the defense and like Mac and Hicks and stuff, like going back and forth in training camp, has got to be awesome, because I don't think Trubisky's ever been that guy who would do that and like talk trash and stuff in games. So that's got to be fun. I can't imagine the difference and like the energy and stuff on the team and everything. It's got to be a great time.
Yeah, it's a natural leader, natural competitor. Trubisky, his biggest problem was, if you watched him in college, he played well in college, but he was playing very confidently. He was running the offense. Whereas when he came to the NFL, the dude never like ran the offense confidently, unless he was playing the Lions, which, any quarterback could do. So it's one of those where he was shot at the Lions. It's one of those where, yeah, Trubisky just never actually took command of the offense and like took on that, like, hey, I'm the quarterback of a roster. I'm the most important player on the team, and I'm going to act that way. Like, he never took that on. So that's why not only was he making mistakes as a, fourth year starter that he shouldn't have been, that he should have cleaned up at the end of his rookie year, but he was also just never going to take that offense as the leader and competitor that everybody needed. And, now we actually have a guy. That's why it's shocking for everybody in Chicago, because we are not used to this. We are not used to having a quarterback who not only has the ridiculous talent, but also has the competitive and leadership drive to, day one walk in acting as if like, hey, I'm going to be the starter. I'm going to be the guy.
Yeah. All right. And for our last thing of today, you're going to tell me about the Zobrist story.
Oh God. So this is incredible. This is, you want to talk about scum of the earth. Not Zobrist, but the person associated with him. So Ben Zobrist is a player, for people that do not know, was it was an integral part of the 2016 Chicago Cubs that won, that World Series and broke the, 108-year streak of losing that they had. That he was an integral part of it. He's a leader in the locker room. He's a great team guy. He's a great fielder. He was a very consistent hitter at times when you needed him. He actually made an incredible hit. I think he had like an RBI double that put them in the lead in that last I think it was like the 10th inning. Yeah, of that game 7 in that World Series. So he was, and there's the famous video of him like, pumping his fist as he's jumping onto second base after completing the double. So he's an incredible part of that win and a part of that team. Randomly though, he suddenly stepped away from baseball for a year, and everybody kind of went, that's weird. I wonder what's happening, like out of nowhere. I mean, he's an older guy. He's, in his late 30s. So you're like, in baseball, that's old, but you're still playing well for a team, then it makes sense for you to continue playing unless you're just stepping away because you're retiring. But this was like he's randomly stepping away. Then there was some news coming out that, he's stepping away because he's getting a divorce. And so then everybody was like, that sucks. Like, that's really unfortunate. And like, yeah, I could understand that. Well, for the longest time, nobody really knew what was happening. Everybody just kind of understood that, like, oh, he's getting a divorce. That's why he stepped away from baseball. That's probably why he did it. Well, then, then it came out that maybe there was an affair that happened, and that's why. And everybody was like, okay, that would make even more sense. Then the news broke a day or two ago, and the entire world went, wow, how scummy of a person could you be? Was just answered in this story. And essentially, what happened was, is the story came out, is back in 2017 or 20, I think it was 20, yeah, it was 2017, Zobrist and his wife were having some problems as far as their marriage. They, both being very religious, outwardly religious, went to the church for counseling. They went to their pastor for counseling. They were going through counseling, and then in 2018, the pastor they were getting counseled from suggested that Ben take a year away from baseball in order to kind of focus on his own anxiety, depression, and the issues he was having in his marriage. Zobrist agreed, took that year off. While he also did that, he also suggested that he, give his wife space and that they continue to do counseling sessions together as well as independently. Apparently, that was because the pastor was banging his wife.
I have a feeling.
That's why the pastor suggested. So not only was this pastor that they went to in a time of need to help their marriage, and Ben Zobrist trusted, but the pastor was banging his wife while also suggesting that Ben take a year off, lose that salary, and then also give his wife space. Obviously, the space that he then would fill with his dick. So, there's that. It's just an incredibly terrible person. Like, literally, like,
Wow.
how much of a scum could you become? How much of a scumbag could you be? Was answered, and we now know this is how far you can go. Literally, while he's saying it to this man's face about, hey, you should give your wife space, you should take a year off from sports, you should really focus on yourself, and figure out why you're not being a part of your marriage, and I'm gonna do some independent counseling sessions with your wife, aka I'm gonna bang your wife behind the door. And yeah, unbelievable.
I don't understand. Why would he tell him to take a year off? Because, like, if you're thinking long term, which I'm guessing this guy isn't, wouldn't you want him to accumulate more salary so once they get divorced, there's more of that 50% of like what the wife would come away with, and then you would run off with? Like, come on, man, Dylan, do it the right way.
Not only that, Dylan, but wouldn't you want him to be gone, like on road trips with the team and everything?
Yeah, I don't get that.
It's terrible. It's unbelievably terrible that they would go to the church in support, and this pastor that they trusted to help with the counseling just behind his back, banging his wife, while also telling him that he needs to give his wife space. Can you, incredible. I cannot believe how, you cannot be crappier as a person than that human being.
I didn't think that was going to be the story, to be honest. That's not where I thought that was going. Wow.
Oh no, it's going. And so now the rule, it just came out that Ben Zobrist is suing the pastor for $8 million, basically in lost salary for that year that he was not playing in Major League Baseball because the pastor convinced him not to.
I don't know how strong of a legal case that is. I'd be very curious, but
well, I think it's also like damages. It's like, you could do like damages, and all that. But I mean, it is 100% true. If the guy convinced him to not play baseball that year, and like he was making I think he was probably making more than $8 million a year, especially at that time, because he was a good player.
Yeah.
So, like,
but I mean, it's not like a doctor. It's like literally you're being convinced of your own opinion. I'd be curious to see, like, legally, is there anything there? Is that even like a case? I don't really know.
I would assume you're able to get something for damages, because I mean, it's literally lost salary, especially if he's got like evidence, like he's got like text conversations or things that were recorded as far as their sessions and talking, that where you can literally point to, hey, here's him telling me that I need to take this year off and that's the only way that I can get better. And then you obviously, there's the trust part of it where, this is a person that's supposed to be a trusted person and then does that to you. And then you don't play baseball and then you lose all that money. Meanwhile, he's also basically, banging your wife behind
Yeah.
behind
Small
closed doors.
detail.
And
He's
yeah.
40 too. I had no idea. He's 40?
Yeah, but this happened a
Wow.
couple of years ago when he was like 36, 37 years old. So he was
Holy
he
cow.
was still playing good baseball at that time. Like I was like, it was one of those where when he left the Cubs for that year, I was like, oh, that kind of sucks. We're losing Zobrist. Like, geez, like that's not great. Because he was kind of like a locker room glue guy that also performed well, enough to make him, a consistently important player.
Right.
So
Wow.
yeah, it was a wild story, and I heard it, like I said, for the longest time. I mean, we're talking since 2017, 2018, when he actually stepped away from baseball. Everybody in the world was confused because they were like, why is Zobrist, like one of the leaders on the team, stepping away from baseball? That makes no sense. Well, understandable when everything's going on. And apparently too, yeah, so this is actually, if you're able to pull this up, this is the picture of his wife and then the picture of the pastor too. Um yeah, it's the fact that he had to step away, for all this makes complete sense now,
Yeah, look at the
especially, with
pastor,
it.
of course.
Yeah, and then apparently too, the other issue is that the only reason why this got found out is because the pastor's wife found his phone and all the details of the text conversations and stuff between him and Zobrist's wife.
This is why you go to an old priest, man. Like an old, disgusting hag. Like that's why that's where you get your advice from. Not this like half Chad looking dude. Come on. Not a safe play.
It's just he's not. It's man. There's so many ways that you can look at this. I mean, one, it's unbelievably terrible because there are good people within the church, and the church constantly tries to give itself a bad name by everything that happens within it. But there are actually genuinely good people in it that will help people, and there's probably plenty of people that have been helped by their church in situations like this. So the fact that somebody in a would go to the church and their a pastor that they trust in order to help them through such a difficult situation and massive situation. I mean, getting a divorce is not like a simple thing, obviously. So helping somebody in such a crucial situation in their life is important, and the fact that you put all your trust in that person to help you get through that, and it seems like they're helping, and then all of a sudden you find out basically the whole time they've been betraying you, is pretty rough. And so that's like another way you can look at it. It's just it's not great for just everything around the whole situation.
Yeah. Wow, what a somber note. What a somber note to end on with that. That sucks.
I know, it's not a spectacular
fun
end.
story.
Actually, we could finish. I don't know if you want to like throw another segment in there.
What do you
Because
have?
we didn't talk about the NCAA or ruling.
Oh yeah, I was kind of curious about that.
We can end with that too. But yeah, it's just all I'll say is just what a terrible person. And I honestly, I hope he wins that freaking case because he deserves to at that point.
Yeah,
I
would
hope
say
he wins
so.
that case. I hope that he divorces his wife and finds happiness elsewhere. So
yeah, you're not repairing that. I don't think that's not going to go through too. That's not really going to happen.
No, he also just deserves at this point to find happiness again because he's been scorned in possibly the worst way ever imaginable. So
yeah, this is such a bad pick, but yeah, we could walk through this pretty quick.
Yeah, so we'll transition to a better topic in sports in order to leave on a better note. So, do you know anything about what happened or the ruling?
I know. I basically saw a headline. That's pretty much it.
Okay. So essentially, the ruling was, and I actually have a quote from it or from somebody that was a part of it. So I'm going to that right now. Essentially, the Supreme Court unanimously agreed with the players that there are no restrictions on benefits that schools can give to players as long as they're education related, aka school internships, computers, abroad opportunities, although this ruling is not a pay for play doctorate, so it's not setting a standard for pay for play. In other words, meaning that they're getting
Still not
the money
paying
they
them.
should get from play.
Yeah.
So, but what it does mean is that there can now no longer be restrictions that would inhibit educational opportunities to athletes because of NCAA regulations as far as what schools can give or uh, basically present to athletes. So, like I said, things like computers, for example. If obviously receiving a computer, if you're somebody who comes from a poor neighborhood and you have a scholarship to play football at this university or whatever, you probably also don't have the money to afford things like getting a really nice computer to help you through school. Things like that can now be afforded to the player without penalty from the organizations, and that's what the Supreme Court was ruling on. And
Oh
they
my
ruled
God, that was
unanimously.
restricted?
Yeah, that was restricted before. Dylan, at one point they had a restriction that players, if they got a bagel, could not put jelly on the bagel. They could receive cream cheese though. That was a literal that at one point
What?
that was a restriction. Like
Why?
I'm not kidding, Dylan. That's how restrictive the NCAA has been, and that's why this landmark type of decision for the NCAA is huge. Because and actually, if you read I don't know if you want to pull up on Google on the side for yourself so you can read them. Judge Kavanaugh came out with some just straight like blasting the NCAA statements that are incredible and sum up pretty much the entire conversation surrounding the NCAA and why this, everybody's basically against them. And it basically, if you read some of his quotes, they're just incredible. I don't know if you want to read, if you have them pulled up and you want to read them out loud, because they're just
Yeah, I got one. Nowhere
Go
else. Okay, first of all, I need to figure out about that jelly thing. That's crazy. And again, I hate these semantic games because we all know there have been so many instances of people getting paid under the table to get paid and or to go to colleges and stuff. Like the ridiculous penny pinching of these stupid rules like that when people are probably getting paid thousands of dollars regardless and people can't get computers. Come on, man. Disgusting. Anyways, nowhere else in America can businesses get away with agreeing not to pay their workers a fair market rate on the theory that their product is defined by not paying their workers a fair market rate, he wrote. And under ordinary principles of antitrust law, it is not evident why college sports should be any different. Let's see what else this article's got for free. Not much else. Here.
There's another great quote by him too that sums up the entire situation and basically on the what the NCAA basically has taken advantage of the athletes. There's another great quote that he said. I don't know if you have that too.
Maybe this one. College presidents, athletic directors, coaches, conference commissioners, and NCAA executives take in 6- and 7-figure salaries. Colleges build lavish new facilities, but the student athletes who generate the revenues, many of whom were African American and from lower income backgrounds, end up with little or nothing. Very true.
That was the quote. That entire quote. It's a longer quote, but that entire quote right there, that includes that statement, is incredible because it sums up the entire NCAA and why it's been such a issue and a hot button topic. Because people don't realize that, as much as I'm a diehard Ohio State fan, Ohio State's football team is worth $1.5 billion still. That is more money than many organizations within the NBA, NFL, literally any major sport. The amount of teams that they're worth more is ridiculous. I think at Alabama at one point there was a statement that was basically every player is worth almost like 500 million or something like that, or it was every player is worth almost 50 million.
It's such a shame that they can't afford to pay their players because it costs so much to run a college football program,
Yeah, well, and they also hide behind. That's the other thing too, is the NCAA likes to hide behind statements that they'll throw out almost as like roadblocks. It's like you're running down the thing and then you just throw stuff in front of you. Like one of the statements that they said was, what a lot of things they'll say is like, the money that's made from the football program goes towards the other programs, and it's like, yeah, okay, you know how much money you make overall in on a team. I mean, I just laid out that how much money Ohio State's worth, and they're not even the highest valued franchise in the last year or so as far as college football. So the fact that that's a statement that's going to be said, and then they also throw out the word of amateurism, and whether they're amateurs and stuff like that. That's another just crap statement, because the players, I'm not saying you need to go out here and pay players a bunch of money to play for your team, because that's going to obviously create problems for bigger universities recruiting players over smaller universities. I get that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that those athletes should be at least privy to a lot of, they should at least feel what the production that they're putting in bringing, or they're getting from their play, such as providing them with laptops, providing them with proper room and board, providing them with proper meals and proper equipment, providing them with amenities, things like that. They can at least feel the fact that they're as important as they are to the organization as far as money goes. And a lot of times that's what people miss, is that athletes come in from small communities that are poor, and this is their opportunity. This is what's getting them out of whatever community they grew up in, is their athletic ability. And then when they get to a university, guess what? They don't have the money to pay for things like any amenity that any college kid would like or would want to be afforded. That's
gross. Yeah.
Like Dylan, it was an incredible issue at Ohio State about 15 years ago, where Terrell Pryor, the quarterback at the time, had gone with a couple athletes. I don't know if you remember this story. Had gone with a couple athletes. So at Ohio State, when you play that school up north, there's like trophies or little trinkets that you get if you win, stuff like that you get from those things. They traded those to a tattoo artist for some tattoos. It was such a massive issue that the coach had to leave the team and was basically let go, and that was it. His career was over. And those players were like blackballed, and there was like all kinds of, it was like, oh my God, I can't believe what these players did at Ohio State. Literally traded a couple items they received from those games for tattoos, because guess what? They couldn't pay for them themselves. And guess what? They're college kids, and they want to do things, and they want to get things done like any other college kid in the entire universe. So yeah, that was a massive issue 15 years ago, like a crazy massive. Jim Tressel, the coach at the time, was basically had to leave the university, and was basically like his career was over at that point. He never got a job after that. That was, significant enough. I mean, he was, yeah, that was the hot button issue.
That's wow. Yeah, no, I thought they got those things already. I thought, like, for the most part, they were room to board, fed, obviously. I thought laptops provided, anything that I thought they got the whole suite along with the scholarship and everything. I didn't even think this was up for contention, honestly.
No, because there's so many restrictions that the NCAA puts basically on what the university can give to athletes. That because, and they, like I said, they cite things like well, it helps to create a fair environment for all universities involved, and it's like, yeah, okay, well, the university providing an internship for athletes to pursue their career outside of athletics, because guess what, majority of the players in NCAA don't make it to the pros. They don't make a career out of their athletics. They make a career out of whatever they're going to school for, and they use their athletics to get there. And so when those internships and things like that are rejected, because that would be potentially the school giving them, showing favoritism or giving them extra things, or, whatever you want to, whatever the NCAA basically used to justify why it was ruled, against them, is what used to happen. And this ruling basically says, like, hey, you are a hundreds of billions of dollar organization in the NCAA that brings in a ridiculous amount of money every year. And guess what? Coaches are being paid $10 million a year, $8 million a year, and then, colleges will say, like, well, how do we have the money to provide these extra things to the players? And it's like, well, maybe you should have saved for a rainy day. How about that? How about that statement that gets thrown out against every other single person that, exists when something happens? When this whole COVID thing happened and businesses and the government was like, well, you should have saved for 6 months in advance. And it's like, yeah, I'm sorry. When did you want me to do that? When I was $120,000 in debt from college? Yeah, let me just go ahead and throw 6 months of my salary into a savings account and not pay, everything else that I have to do. So it's
Am-
just,
Are we really
go
going to
ahead.
pretend like you can't establish a certain standard across the NCAA and then siphon off a bunch of money in a percentage format or something from like an Alabama and Ohio State, and then use those funds provided for those smaller universities to still
Yeah,
provide athletes with what they're supposed to get? Like, come on.
Dylan, this is an NCAA that's discussing also to expand the college football playoff, which would, guess what, generate more revenue.
Yeah.
That's what happens. That's what happens when you have a tournament. Then all of a sudden, the March Madness tournament generates a ridiculous amount of revenue for the NCAA. Guess what? The college football playoff expanding to 12 teams. You can say all you want about saving, about how it includes for other teams and it's inclusive and it's better and it should happen. But guess what? The bottom line is everything money talks, and motivation for this to build to a 12 team tournament is to up the popularity of the NCAA football world and to also generate more income from those games that are going to be televised and tickets and all that fun stuff.
Oh yeah.
Trust me, they're not hurting, or they're not making that decision for the players. And those players at Cincinnati that didn't have an opportunity to play in the playoff, or those players at UCF that didn't have they're not thinking about them. They're thinking about the money that's going to be generated from having this tournament created, as well as rekindling some of the popularity that they've lost in the past years because it's the same teams over and over again in the playoff. That also is what they're thinking about, is the money that they're going to get from that.
Oh,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
like in literally the same time that they're complaining, or they're trying to fight this in the Supreme Court to basically keep their money, they're also discussing expanding which the playoff, which would generate a ton more money. So that's what the NCAA has been in its, for years and years and years. And everybody's been like, at some point this is going to come to a head. At some point they're going to reach a breaking point, or there's going to be a punishment, or there's going to be some kind of something that they're going to feel. And finally, it's come. The bell has been tolled, and here we go.
Yeah, at this point, if you're still on the side of the NCAA, shouldn't pay athletes or at least equip them in a certain way. Like, that's the most bootlegger stance I can honestly come up with. I mean, again, the simplest plan, the cheapest plan is establishing a standard to make it competitive across all different leagues or whatever. So at least people have laptops and they are able to get an education should they actually choose to take advantage of that opportunity. Many won't. They probably won't. They should have the opportunity and be equipped to do so and make that decision. I mean, that's literally bottom line. The greed knows no bounds to be able to properly actually supply these people and these these athletes with just literally, basics and stuff. And yeah, you could be like, oh, well, they already get a free ride and everything and all this stuff. And be like, yeah, okay, again, the alternative is just like, okay, are you really arguing for the NCAA to hoard more millions of dollars? I don't care. It's not going to affect my life. Yeah, maybe it'll be better for them. They'll feel like, oh, you got screwed over because you're not an athlete in the NCAA or whatever. I'm sorry, that's not how it works or whatever. If you're generating that much revenue and you're actually making that big of a difference, they do in a way deserve that. Yeah, they get to screw up off in classes maybe or whatever and still make it big in the NBA, NFL, whatever it might be. But that's kind of just how the world works. It shouldn't still be argued on behalf of for the NCAA to hoard even more of what they clearly do not need if they're already trying to generate more revenue just off the bat. So,
well, and
boom.
Here's another thing too to think about is Chris Sims, who I love. I love Chris Sims. Listening to him, sometimes he's a little ridiculous, but most of the time he's great. And he said it perfectly. And he said one of the things that always rubbed him wrong was if you go and look at scrimmages and the spring scrimmage that is always marketed and showed by teams, people have to pay to go to that event, and they pay, guess who? The university. And then what happens at that event is when those players are done with the scrimmage, they have to sit there for like 6 hours and sign autographs for all the people that paid to go to the event. Guess who has to sit there and sign the autographs? The players. Guess who makes the money from the ticket sales of those people that those autographs are being signed for? The university. Guess what happens if one of those players decides to go and get $1 for one autograph outside of that? In trouble immediately from the NCAA because it's against the rules.
Literal Scrooge McDuck behavior.
Yeah, like that athlete could walk out and say, he could send out a tweet that says, $5 autographs I'm signing in, the mall this, tonight at 8:00. The NCAA, he's going to be punished because of it, because you can't receive any money for your autograph or anything like that. That's why the image and likeness issue is something that is coming to a head finally, because it's crap like that where the university is going to make a ridiculous amount of money off of them signing autographs at the scrimmage and people paying tickets to go to that. But then if they try to go get some of that money for themselves by signing autographs outside of hours that they're even at the university, this is on their own personal time that they would have to do this, outside of all the practice hours and stuff that they have to be there as well as classes. If they went to go on their personal time to do that, guess what? They would be fined. They'd be in trouble.
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about with the NCAA. So if literally, like you said, if anybody supports the NCAA at this point, and makes the argument, and again, it's, guess what? We're, capitalism runs the country, and you have to live and die with that then. And guess what? In a world where these players are generating billions of dollars for the NCAA as well as their company, their universities, they deserve at some point some small percentage of that pie at least, in order to recoup everything that they're bringing in. Because guess what? The NCAA is selling a product, and that product is those players. So
yeah. Slowly but surely, little bouts of progress, but I think that's where we're going to end it tonight.
Yep.
We are now officially available on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify. Of course, still on YouTube as well, but audio versions only. This one will be even quicker to put up on there very shortly. Yeah, those are the major developments for June 24th, midnight on the dot. So, yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Tune in, of course, next week with more topics, more issues, and I'm sure we'll figure out some way to mention some more Bears talk in there. So, just trying, for even the sake of that, is us just ranting about our team. So, yeah, thanks for everybody for joining us or watching wherever you are, or listening wherever you are now at this point. And tune in every Wednesday. We also post all of our clips to YouTube as well. So if you don't have the time to listen to the full podcast and you want to just listen to little tidbits here and there, we also post those clips to YouTube.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Have a good night, everyone. Drop a sub on YouTube, follow on Spotify, or follow on Apple Podcasts as well. Thank you.
Good night.